let's talk about the power of the Doctor. Jodie Whittaker's final outing as the 13th Doctor prior to her regeneration, wrapping up an era of the show that has statistically been one of its least successful, finally casting Chris Chibnall into the void. As discussed at the end of my honest review of Legend of the Sea Devils, I was always going into this episode fearfully, considering just how much they wanted to put in. Regeneration needs to wrap up the Doctor and Yaz's romance, the Master's back, plus the Daleks, the Cybermen, Vinda, Kate Stewart, Unit, Tegan, Ace, and that's just all we did know about going in. Who knew what else we'd expect? It all made me think that it was going to be a clustered mess with no real focus on the most important element, that being Jodie's swan song. Well, now we've had the episode, I'm gonna share my own personal thoughts and feelings on Power of the Doctor, recapping key plot details. So what does that mean, River?
Spoilers!
Cheers, love. Well, that was a blast. Genuinely came away from Power of the Doctor satisfied enough to have had a great time. Now, this one definitely isn't without faults, because if you were to judge this story on its plot, then this one is a complete and utter mess. As predicted, it's got far too much going on at once, an entire series worth. And halfway through, I had the realization that I'd have much preferred Flux to never have happened, and all of the story elements within Power of the Doctor to be fleshed out into a 6-episode miniseries. Because the core ideas here were all really cool. The Master taking on the role of Rasputin in Russia 1916, weaving his way into the infrastructure. That was cool. The Cybermasters have kidnapped a giant mass of sentient energy and have a cyber conversion planet with a TARDIS plugged into it. That was cool. Ashad's Cybermen want to infiltrate Unit HQ and convert them as part of taking over key Earth defense infrastructure. That was cool. There's a rogue Dalek who wants to betray the Daleks as they've forgotten the core principle of the Dalek mission, that it was to preserve the Khaled race, yet now the Khaled race have been forgotten. That was cool. And then the Daleks want to trigger all these volcanoes on Earth at once to cause tectonic disruption. A little bit 60s level craziness, but fair enough. And then we have the Master's core plan of becoming the Doctor, also very Doctor Who Adventures comic strip, but quite bold nonetheless. In principle, all of those ideas would have made great full-length episodes or full series arcs, but as it is, they're all so scattered and mashed up, and none of them feel at all wholesome or complete, especially when it comes to the resolutions for them. Volcanoes? Let's just press some switches and cover them in steel. Cyber planet? Let's just let the sentient energy squid go mental on it. Unit HQ being converted? Let's just collapse the building. Even all the setup with the seismologists and paintings going missing. Like, I genuinely couldn't tell you off the top of the head from one watch where either of those subplots led or what their deeper purpose was. And then the production quality here in the opening act, I was worried. I thought the CGI space train sequence looked really awful. The score was so loud that it drowned out most of the dialogue. It really felt like Murray Gold was back. The editing was so rapid and choppy, and it had a bunch of strobe light effects on it. Like, that whole first part of the episode was dizzying to get through. Thankfully, as the story went on, the production got a lot better and was able to breathe more. Yeah, it's the overall plot that let this thing down. The finer layers of this episode were terrible in principle, with nothing properly linking up. And there were far too many lines like, "How did you get here?" or "So the Doctor still doesn't explain things," or "I haven't got time to explain." It's as if Chibnall had a couple ideas he wanted to explore in future seasons, but after being cut short and seeing as though he probably wouldn't have a platform to expand on them ever again, he just thought, well, let's chuck them in together, nothing to lose. Well, what he did lose was a solid premise, but in hindsight, I don't really care. Chibnall by this point has just given up writing anything coherent, so I never had any expectations on the narrative being amazing here. Like, he doesn't even really cover the Jo Martin Doctor again properly. Yeah, she's in it, but as an AI projection. We don't get anything regarding the Timeless Child again. That's just shelved completely. However, what we do get are a couple of risks being taken within this story, which I think were really quite refreshing, and there's plenty of fan service that I was just glad to see, regardless of most of it serving as a distraction from how diabolically chaotic the core story was. So in terms of the risks, I'll start with Dan's departure. That was something I actually thought they handled really well here. We all kinda knew going into this episode that Dan's time has been quite wasted. Other than the opening episodes of Flux, Dan really has become lost in the series, just being a bit of comedic relief now and again, occasionally just wandering off and doing stuff. And considering the amount of returns in this episode, they were the ones people were really gonna remember and talk about, not Dan's involvement. So to simply go, right, I nearly died in the intro sequence, I can't keep taking these risks, I've got a life I happily want to go back to, let's just get it over and done with so we can just have that moment and then refocus on the episode. Brilliant. It actually kept the pacing of the episode a lot more balanced than it has been in recent times, that's for certain. Another risk I liked was the callback to the war games of forced regeneration, with the Master taking over the Doctor's body halfway through the episode. I never saw anything like that coming, and in terms of one of the Master's plans, this was something that was actually unique, and for a long time looked like for once he was actually going to succeed. So that was an unexpected shift in the story that really worked for me. But my main risk that they took here was to not go down the expected route that I'm honestly certain over 90% of Whovians knew was going to come in this episode, and that's the kiss between the Doctor and Yaz. We never get it. In fact, the two of them as a relationship or a romance is never brought up properly. That was a 180 that I didn't expect. It gives both of them a remarkably bittersweet ending. I imagine there will be portions of the fan base who are annoyed that it wasn't brought up, considering the amount of build they've been giving it in recent times, but to me it just proves that the universe in Doctor Who shouldn't be predictable. And as far as predictability goes, I think we've got some fan service to discuss. Honestly, this to me was a superior anniversary story to The Day of the Doctor. By comparison, this story did so much more to make my heart warm. The idea of bringing back past Doctors as manifestations of the Doctor's personality to give a jargony reasoning for them to be there looking older was done smartly, because really, we Whovians couldn't care less about how the actors look. We know they're older now, we just want to see them again before it's too late. And this may be the last time we see some of these actors on screen as a form of the Doctor again. Sure, we've seen Davison, McGann and Bradley before since the show was revived, but to have McCoy back in full costume and finally getting to see Colin, that was just really lovely. And the little moments that McCoy and Davison shared with Tegan and Ace while in full costume were really heartwarming. Let's talk about Tegan and Ace actually. Janet Fielding and Sophie Aldred haven't skipped a beat at all in their roles. I am glad that Tegan and Davison had that little talk together to clarify why Tegan was annoyed, because the entire time I thought Chibnall had just got her totally wrong. She left in Resurrection of the Daleks of her own accord, yet it came across that she felt like the Doctor abandoned and forgot her, so at least they were able to somewhat sweep that under the rug before the end. She was great though, and seeing Ace again too in her jacket with her bat smashing Daleks and grabbing some Nitro 9, that was amazing. But when she first meets Jodie and calls her Professor, that genuinely nearly made me cry out my Whovian tears. I was just elated. Oh, and by the way, I can totally see a 4-volume Big Finish box set with Ace, Tegan and Kate Stewart, by the way. In general, this episode is jam-packed with little references to the show from all over. We get nods to Survival, Legopolis, the War Games, mentions of Adric and the Brigadier and tissue compression, plus a bunch of stuff relating to the Jodie era like Ashad, Vinder, Graham's return of course, and then we get the lovely group meeting at the end, getting to see Jo and Mel, and of course Chesterton, which was the one that really got to me, as one of only 2 original TARDIS crew members still alive. Oh, and we see the Master Doctor wearing loads of bits of old Doctor outfits, and even plays Troughton's recorder, which was really rather nice. This felt 10 times more of a celebration of the show's history than The Day of the Doctor ever was. The argument that it's just fan service for fan service's sake is still applicable here, and I've only got my rose-tinted spectacles on for it because of how much on the whole I've disliked the Chibnall era. I can't hide that. It's like he threw all these things he knew people were going to love into the episode to try and resolve his past mistakes, which, let's face it, was never going to happen. But for a sucker like me, it worked a treat. However, at this point of the review, my intro to the video comes full circle, and that's in relation to Jodie being lost in her own final episode. She wasn't that prominent at all really here. She had some moments, sure, but overall she was just a piece of the episode, not a focal point of it. I actually thought at a few moments here she was quite irritable too. When Dan leaves, she doesn't really say anything, she just smiles awkwardly and goes into the TARDIS. We get plenty of those classic Chibnall, right, I'm going to take a second and I'm going to contextualize everything by saying everything that's going on at once and make the audience know what's happening. I hate those scenes. And then when she realizes she's regenerating, she gets annoyed and complains that she wants more time. How very 10th Doctor of you, Jodie. More on that later, by the way. And by having Sacha Dhawan as the Doctor for a good portion, that didn't help her screen presence either. So it doesn't feel like a regeneration story, it feels like a pre-anniversary story with a regeneration at the end. I'm still bored of the Doctor having all the time in the world to have a grand speech and a proper goodbye and a lovely regeneration. Hopefully one day a Doctor can just die without the bells and whistles attached. But overall, the glory shots of her changing into Tennant on the cliff top looked lovely. And his opening line of knowing these teeth and the what was a funny throwback. I'm looking forward to seeing where all this heads. So overall, with the Power of the Doctor as a story, it's hopeless. Clunky, messy, anticlimactic, nothing there really of note. It's a bunch of solid ideas which would have been better fleshed out into a full series that all come and go far too easily. However, here for me, it's all the cameos, Sacha's really great performance, a strong finish for Yaz, and a lot of fun nods to the show gone by that were the real power here. The Power of the Doctor was the power the show has had on the fandom, and it made me remember just why I love the show so much in the first place. Well, there's Jodie gone, and we are on to the Tennant Mark II era. But what did you lot think of the Power of the Doctor? Let me know in the comments below, and I shall see you next year when Doctor Who returns. Allons-y!